In our last step, I told you that I was going to sew across the top of it with a 1/4 inch stitch, and I have done so. It's completely pressed, and it's time to add the trim. Now there's two ways that you can add a trim along the bob. You can stitch it on, or you can hot glue it on. And I know there's some people who are going to leave nasty comments, oh, you can't use hot glue. You can use hot glue. Sometimes it's not practical to do it if you have fabric that's non-porous or can't adhere to it, or you have a trim that can't. But this is certainly porous enough that you can. And if you're a craftsy type of person and you're not very good with the sewing machine, I'm going to recommend gluing it on. And it's just a little easier to control. Sometimes with stitching, which we have no problem here stitching on either, you're going to have to put 2 rows of stitching. 2 rows on a solid fabric, it could pucker it a little bit. I mean, so can glue. For now, I'm just going to choose putting the trim on with hot glue. So that having said, I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to start gluing. The first part of gluing, my glue gun, it's an old glue gun, but it works well. Get the other end here. You're going to bend in, take your hot glue, glue a little area, and bend it in so you don't have any raw edges. So I just bent that in, no raw edges. And you can go ahead, working with small amounts at a time, add some glue right to your valance. Like so. And slowly add it on. Now, depending on the type of fringe you're using, I'm gluing on the whole body of it, but I'm letting that little bit of fringe hang off. That also hides the lining. And on a valance like this, if you plan on putting white lining to it, you should do something. If it's got self-lining, you know, same fabric on both sides, it's not so bad. But if you're not doing that, you should definitely put a trim, and I recommend putting a trim on this type of valance no matter what type of lining you're using. Just my recommendation. And as you can see, it's fairly easy. I'm moving right along with it, and I'm also not getting any bunchiness going around the curves. It's all about you can do it one time. You don't want the glue to set up for very long. Get to the corner, and this does go right around the corner very nicely. And doesn't that add an awful lot to this? Really sets it off. Okay, at this point it's time to pleat it. And pleating it, you have these notches. This is the return, and it has a notch right there. And then over here, there's a notch. Now the notches that are up on the top, for this one right here, lines up right here where just before it starts to circle. This one right here, again, lines up right where it ends or begins the half circle. So in each one of these, that's where it lines up with. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the first notch and grab the material right here, right where it begins to go around the half circle. And we're going to bring this over to the return. Notch to notch. Now, not only are we going to do that, we're going to measure. Sometimes you lose a little bit, and you have to move this out. And most times, actually. So in this case, 3.5, it's just a hair outside of the notch. So, because you're putting it on a 1x4 board, you want to make sure that regardless of where that first notch is, that this notch always stays on this corner. It's just this notch. You might have to move it out, and I'm just a hair outside of where that notch is. So now I'm going to stick a pin in there. I'm also going to stick a pin, and you see this is just hiding this seam right in here. I'm going to put a pin right where this corner, again, where this little half circle starts. I'm going to put another pin in here at the bottom, like so. That's the return. That's the part that's going to wrap around the board. My next one, notch is here. You'll also find a notch in the center right here. You have one notch here, and then one in the center right in between these two. And that's the one we're going to concentrate on. We're going to grab this, and to right where this starts to square off to go straight, I'm going to bring it over like that. And then I'm going to pin this here. I'm going to stick another pin. I'm going to do it on both. I flip this around. You see where this can go up or down? I want to make sure it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick another pin at the top right here to keep everything even. And do the same thing right here. And after I'm done pleating it, I'll show you what I mean a little bit better where you can see it. And I'm going through all the materials to make sure I'm going through. And this you want about halfway. I'm not going to pin that yet until I get the next one over. Keeping the top even. A pin. And a pin. Now I'm going to look at this, make sure it all lines up pretty evenly going across here, and so far I like it. I'm going to take a pin, put it in, and a pin here. Now you notice there's no real notch here, because we don't need a notch here, because now we have the seam to go by. Now we're going to grab our next one right here, and we're going to bring it over to the seam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put it just a hair past that seam. So I'm not right on the edge, I'm just a little bit past it, just to hide it. Another pin. And of course you don't want this. You want to make sure that you're keeping this all nice and even. Put another pin at the top. Okay, with me so far? Good. Next one, grabbing right where it's nice and straight, and then right where that curve starts, right there, and right where that top notch is. Grab it. Another pin. Yep. Again, we're back to where the center notch, right in between the two straightens, where the straight part is going to be right in the middle of that. You see that notch? And this is the notch for this right here. And you're going to bring this over to here. Here, now it's just starting to look like your pattern that you originally cut, except now you got 4 boxes opposed to the 3 boxes that you originally had in your pattern. Okay, now we're at the return, the other return, going right to that notch with it, hiding that seam. And we have to check it, make sure we have our 3.5 inches. Might have to pull it out a little bit. Okay. You think you're done, but you're not. Now we have to check the overall width of this. Just because you went to the notches doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to boom right at 40 inches. And that's okay. We have plenty of room to move. And in fact, it's 39.5. So that means we have to make up another 1/2 inch. So now you have to start looking at your boxes. That's a little under 10 inches. That one's a little under 10 inches. This one's pretty close. And that one's pretty close. So I'm going to say, I'm going to take this one and I'm just going to move it out. So your notches are there, they're a good starting point. It doesn't mean with the thickness of the fabric, with every fabric, you may still have to make some adjustments to it. So, and pulling it out a little bit is no big deal, or putting it in if it came out a little bit too big. Those are just, the notches are there just to help guide you, but it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It all depends on the thickness of the fabric and so on. So we're going to adjust that one. I'm going to come over here on this last one. And I'm going to pop this one out a little bit. Then we're going to check it again. Right on the nose. So that's good. Now I'm going to have to pull this out just a little bit. Put the pin back in. Make sure we still have the 3.5. Actually it is, but I have to pull this out a little bit. Right here. Recheck it one more time. 40 inches. Next step. Next step is to press the entire valance, and we'll get to that in the next segment.